We will start today with some discussion on JP Morgan note on copper. Then we'll talk a little bit about the Glencore versus Teck deal and what's happening, what are the news in relation to that. And we'll close with some interesting deal ideas. So make sure you stay until the end. So with that out of the way, hi, Lucho, how are you?
Hey, Paula, how are you?
Always good to see the sunset, behind you. I think it's gonna be
We take it while they last in Lima,
Yeah. Well, it's probably gonna be
60 to 70% of the time it's overcast. So we take whenever there's sunset, we take them.
That's true. Every time I've been there, I had only overcast. So we wanted to list, we're trying to make it very, very short and sweet for people. So we're gonna get right into the topic. And we wanted to start with this note that JP Morgan put out. And just because, all the conversation about the potential scarcity that we're gonna see with copper and all that is starting to get really sort of clear with numbers. So in their note, they're saying that they're seeing for the next decade that the demand for refined copper is gonna be around 32 million tons. I've seen other similar figures from other banks, and that's just super interesting because going from a 2% annual rate from last decade to a 2.5%, it may not seem a lot in the number, like the 2%, versus 2.5, but when you look at the actual number for the million tons, the actual refined copper is going to be quite significant. So we're about 25 million tons now. Or that's the figure that they forecast for this year, the expected figure for this year. And then we see that the energy transition component of the demand is going to keep rising. So they're seeing from it's about 2.5 now in this year, and they're seeing it's going to more than triple, by the end of the next decade. So that's, it's going to change the landscape, massively. What are you thinking in terms of if we stop? There's more points that we're going to go through, but I don't want this to be a monologue. So what do you see in terms of your experience? How different is this starting to feel in terms of what we see in the last decade?
Well, I mean, in the last couple of decades, Paola, really the focus on the growth of copper usage has been very much focused on China, right? And how their accelerated growth and substantial growth year on year has just required more copper, right? The electrification thing, and we talked about this in the last podcast, right? That you've been in the lithium business, I've been in the lithium business. I mean, we saw the electrification and potential usage of copper, not only lithium, but potential usage of copper as something that was definitely to take into consideration. But over the last couple of years, that's taken the forefront, right? It's no longer about how much China is going to grow or not grow. And particularly now that China's growth has slowed down. I mean, it's all about electrification and what, how that's going to affect. And hence, the high prices that we've seen in the last year, particularly, and these spikes that we're seeing. I actually didn't have access to the whole JP Morgan article. I just saw different bullet points like yourself. But, really the takeaway is there's a lot of projected demand for copper, right? So even if you sensitize that, even if you discount it a bit, I mean, it's still a lot of copper that's going to be needed going forward. So then you have to take a look at the supply and really start wondering, what that means. And you know, the notes that we saw talk about, you know, the pipeline of projects, and they talk about the incentive prices, and potential delays in the pipeline of projects. So I mean, it gives a lot to talk about, and obviously, you know, the traditional copper miners, you know, the BHPs, the Rios of this world, the Glencores, obviously, Techs, but also the mid tiers, Capstone, and then you know, Hudbay, and you know, all of these guys are looking at what they're going to do, and that's being reflected in the M&A market, right? You know, First Quantum going into La Granja, you know, Hudbay completing the acquisition of Copper World, obviously at the bigger level, you know, the Glencore Teck deal. So, I mean, everyone's seeing it. And the question is whether it's a bubble or not. I don't think it's a bubble.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bubble either, because one of the other interesting things that that note covered was that we've seen sort of gaps, because they're seeing the predicted gap is going to be significant 10 years ahead, but they're saying that we've seen that before, we've seen a gap before, but the difference this time, and you mentioned a little bit about that, is that the pipeline now is super, you know, dry. There's not much, you know, ready to come on stream. The things that have been sort of put in into the pipeline have been sort of the cheaper, easier brownfield expansions that, you know, are not the same. They're not brand new projects. They're not going to be potentially, they're not going to be as significant or as big. And we're seeing all these restrictions in terms of both the technical aspects, you know, lower grade, deeper, you know, deposits, with also the increased focus on, or not increased focus, but increased difficulty in getting these projects permitted because of NIMBY, because of, you know, restrictions in land use or social reactions and all of that. So
Sorry to interrupt, but just wanted to, you know, my train of thought in there is so much has changed in developing projects over the last decade or 2 decades. Yeah. I mean, I very often comment, you know, the guys from Austin were down here for the big mining expo back in September of last year, right? And they actually went up to visit Antamina, and I said, you know, that's a fantastic operation. And one of my follow-up comments was, if Antamina had to be built today, it probably would not be built. You know, not only because of CapEx concerns and stuff like that, but Antamina, you know, not know how many people know this, has a circa 400 kilometer concentrate pipeline from the Andes all the way down to its dedicated port on the coast of Peru, right? A 400-kilometer pipeline that it's not too big, right? I mean, it's this thick, but, you know, it's still a pipeline. You know, it's 400 kilometers worth of communities and towns and, you know, stuff like that. Trying to get permitting from the government and trying to get, you know, social license to build that pipeline or to include that pipeline within a project, I think today would be impossible, at least in Peru. Okay. So, I mean, there are things, and if you don't do that pipeline, I mean, how do you move the concentrate, right? I mean, you know, it changes the logistics, it changes, you know, so many aspects of a project. And obviously it changes the CapEx, right? So, I mean, a lot of things have changed with new projects. Not only are there fewer projects and the quality of the newer projects, as you said, you know, lower grade, water issues, etc., but just in general, logistically, I mean, it's a different ballgame now, and that just, you know, adds to the complexity of bringing a new project online, particularly something as large as, you know, what you need to fill that gap that you talked about earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, I fully see that. Like this, a project. Well, it was a mine, and it was shut down because it just. I think they're doing something in the region, but a mine in Argentina, they had a similar setup. So they had a concentrate line to get to. I think it went to a port as well, and they were always getting claims that, oh, there's problems here, there's problems there, and that was a big sort of social point of conflict. So I 100% support that now it would be much harder to do something like that. People are getting more difficult to deal with in that sense, and at the same time we need the copper. So we're in a very weird, bizarre situation. The last point, I think we've covered most of the things in that note, but the last point is, and it's sort of like the cherry on top, the copper, the incentive price. So to make sure that these mines are developed when we need them, are started to get developed so that we can get the product when we need it. The industry needs a specific, not necessarily a specific set in stone, but it needs a range of price that makes sure that the operations are not going to have to get shut down and like we've seen in the recent past. And that price is, in at least for JP Morgan, is started as just under $4, and we were under that not that long ago, so we're gonna have to work with that.
Yeah, I mean, and you've got a lot of banks forecasting much higher prices, right? I mean, certainly above $10,000, right? Which I guess is about 4.7 cents per pound. But other banks are talking about $12,000-15,000, right? So much higher. I've seen price decks, obviously not from banks, but from analysts, private equity groups that are using $4 a pound as their price deck, right? That and we've seen prices, higher than than that in the last couple of times. I mean, one of the things that JP Morgan says is that that's likely, the incentive pricing around $4.30 or something like that is we're probably going to see prices overshoot those prices, and that'll be a bubble, if you will. They don't characterize it as, but just to be pragmatic about it, that's a bubble. And if prices stay much higher, there's the whole element of substitution and stuff like that. But with a supply gap of the size that these guys are projecting, I mean, the substitution element or the substitution strategy isn't that easy, right? I mean, I think if you add to that incentive pricing, you have to take a look at the country risk, right? The geographic risk that you're facing, right? Some of the larger projects, Oyu-Tolgoi in Mongolia, you look at what's going on in the Congo and the challenge there. And in Latin America, I mean, Chile, Peru, Argentina, I mean, haven't exactly been, great on the news front in the last few years, right? So there's a lot more than that. There's a lot more than that. Oh, I need a $4 a pound price to build it, right? I don't know. I mean, it really goes very much towards the preference of buying rather than building, right? And that's what a lot of groups are looking at.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so then the next if we're ready to move on to the next topic, we wanted to sort of get an update of what's been happening since the last time we spoke about the Teck deal. A few things have happened in the last couple of weeks. A few things. Do you wanna start? Should I start?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
So the short summary, we're gonna link. We did a quick timeline for if you're interested in sort of seeing it in a timeline fashion, but and we'll link that below. But the very, very succinct update is there's been a back and forth, and Teck is sort of very set on like, no, we don't want this. We're you're gonna destroy our value. You're gonna expose our shareholders to thermal coal, which is something that we don't, I'm not gonna say support, but they don't really. I literally just listened an interview with the Teck CEO, and he was like very dismissive and about which fair enough, it's not part of their criteria. They don't like thermal coal, and there's a lot of people that don't, and so that's kind of they're very sort of firm in that position, and with the backing of Kibble, he's just like, no, I don't want this either. And there's a whole issue about the dual share capital structure, where the Kibble family has super voting shares, like Series A or Type A shares or preferred, something like that. So and at the same time, Glencore has been talking to specific investors, trying to get people to come to their view of the situation, and they're sweetened the deal since in the last couple of weeks. So this in the timeline, you're gonna see that this things happening every single day in a bunch of these days. So it's been super active. I think the interesting thing to see here, at least in my opinion, I think this is super important because it would create potentially the third largest copper producer globally. So that's kind of like why everybody's so paying attention. But at the same time, I think it says a lot about the trend that we're gonna see this year, and you said it before, like if you're not gonna build it, you have to buy it, and a lot of companies are gonna go to that. So what else are we going to see this year? So in your view, what either from the last couple of weeks or before, what is sort of catching your attention more about this deal? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, looking at the timeline, as you said, I mean, every day or every other day, we've got some kind of development or news on it. I mean, this is like a Mexican telenovela, right?
Yeah.
Where every season has like 60 episodes, and there's cliffhangers all the time, because the only way you keep the attention on 60 episodes is if you have cliffhangers all the time. Yeah. And obviously, all of the advisors and lawyers and everyone is trying to get involved. And, you see Robert Friedland commenting and Ross Beatty commenting, and, they talk about, Teck as a Canadian company, and less so about, the assets and stuff like that. Glencore released their financials early, just so that their financials would come out before the April 26th vote on the Teck spinoff. I took a quick look at those numbers, and I mean, Glencore is a force, right? I mean, their marketing group alone, represented, I think, $6 billion, almost $6 billion worth of earnings last year. I mean, you're talking that a lot can be done with the proper management and stuff like that. I mean, I think the synergies were anywhere between 3.5 and $5 billion, right? I mean, so much can be done in terms of value to shareholders if that deal happened. And as you said, I mean, there's obviously, in the case of Teck, I mean, an important shareholder. I mean, the most important shareholder maybe that has to make decisions. But you've got the B shareholders, which have different voting rights, but the B shareholders are institutional on the most part, and and they will be heard, right?
Yeah.
And it's these aren't days, gone are the times where you can just manage a company like a family company, right? I mean, those times are gone. So it's not the end of it, obviously. As you said, I mean, it sort of sets the trend to what's going to happen. And I think in everyone's mind, regardless of how this finally plays out, people are going to be looking very closely at how someone like Glencore, that has a spectacular growth path, right? Not to take anything from what Teck has built, obviously, but it's a different kind of story, and a very colored story at that, right? With everything that Glencore has gone through and the issues that they've had and some of their jurisdictions, et cetera. Glencore is going to be one of the most aggressive ones out there in terms of the majors, and how they're going to grow and how they're going to be aggressive in that growth path. And a lot of people are going to be looking at how far they're willing to go and take that as I don't know if a benchmark is the right word, but certainly, about how to go about taking over someone that doesn't want to be taken over, right? So yeah, as I said, I mean, not the end of it, honestly. I don't think anyone has enough of a crystal ball, no matter how deep you are in the transaction, involved in the transaction, to really know how it's going to play out. But it's clearly not over. The eyes are going to be on what actually happens on April 26th, and depending on that outcome, what's next.
Yeah, I think that that vote is probably gonna force the hand. If it goes well for them, I think they're gonna have a little bit more space to say, like, look, guys, we're fine, we're doing this, like but if it doesn't go through, that's gonna put Teck in a pinch, because it's gonna show that the investors are not happy with the plan, and they may be preferring the other plan.
The one thing that Glencore has done, I think, very successfully is put enough holes into Teck's spinoff to actually make shareholders start questioning it, right? And independent of whether, I mean, if the spinoff happens, then Teck Metals becomes an immediate target, right? Granted that there's cross things between the two and stuff like that, but it becomes an immediate target for a number of players, including Glencore, right? If the spinoff doesn't happen, it gives time for other potential suitors to join the party, right? And competition is healthy, right? Obviously, Glencore, this wasn't thought out overnight, so they've had a lot of time to think about the different situations and see how.
I'm pretty sure they were like, okay, when is the voting? When is the vote? Okay, let's do it a month before.
Well, no, this was well planned out. That's clear. I mean, you don't. It's not that easy to put out your financials ahead of your schedule for someone as big as Glencore, right? So listen, we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, it's super interesting to see. It's very interesting as a spectator. Okay, the last topic for today, we wanted to cover these deal ideas and sort of thoughts that you've got in Peru, and it's combined with a list that the government put out, and you have some interesting insight into that.
Yeah, I mean, in our last podcast, I mentioned the list of projects that that the Peruvian government has on their, on many of their reports, maybe on their website. Can you actually put that slide up on the screen
I
share?
will put it in the video, yeah.
Okay, and I mean, the one I specifically wanted to focus on today was, I mean, they put out a list of projects, 6 new mining projects for 2023 and 2024, that represent almost $7 billion worth of investment, right? And this was fairly recent, from January of this year, right? And it caught my attention right away. I saw it in a friend's chat group, and of course, being the opinionated guy that I am, I immediately said to this one yes, this one no, blah blah blah. But I thought it was a good thing, particularly when we talk about, as we were talking earlier, about copper, right? I mean, the 6th project. Let's just go through the list. I mean, for 2023, there's 4 projects. They are Corani, Magistral, Romina, and Reposición Antamina. Okay, and for 2024, and we'll go into detail in each one of these. For 2024, they've got Zafranal and Yanacocha Sulfuros, right? For 2023, it's almost $3 billion of investment. For 2024, it's $4 billion of investment. Again, we'll share this this in the video. So just quickly, I mean, 2023. I mean, we're in 2023, right? I mean, we're around the corner of May, which for me is pretty much the year is gone, right? Yeah. Corani is a project that actually I know very well. I've been following very closely, and it's owned by Bear Creek Mining, which is a Canadian junior that's had this project forever. It's a zinc-lead project with a very high silver content. So it's one of the few major silver mines, if you will, right? Without being a pure silver mine. The silver byproduct is certainly much larger than the zinc and lead contribution. And that project's been on hold mainly because of financing issues. They've done fantastic work on the social side, but really, because of its size, it's call it a $600+ million capex for a junior company to develop. I mean, that's a challenge, right? Just this last week, I mean, Bear Creek said that they were advancing financing discussions on Corani, et cetera. But I really can't see that project, even though it's got a feasibility study, it's got an environmental impact study approved, and it's got a social license. It's still in the southern part of Peru, which has been, one of the hot spots for the problems earlier this year and late last year. Again, I know the company very well, and they've done fantastic work, but it's not going to be an easy project to finance and take off the ground. And I certainly don't see it, happening this year, right? Yeah. Then the next one is Magistral. Magistral is a copper project. It's owned today by Nexa. It's been, it's passed through a lot of hands. I mean, it's not a particularly big project, and it's been on the pipeline of different companies for the longest time. I honestly haven't heard what's going on with Magistral, but and I'm not sure if Nexa is advancing it or what their plans are. But again, I mean, if there was something going on, you'd expect to know about it by now, at least on the grapevine. Romina is a zinc-lead brownfield, if you will, for Volcan. I mean, Volcan will consider it brownfield. I consider it brownfield as well, because I mean, even though the deposit is new, if you will, it will effectively serve as an expansion or extension of one of the existing Volcan operations. So I think overall it's a brownfield project, and that project will go through. Okay, I mean, Volcan has in their last general shareholders meeting said that that's basically their focus on their next step. I mean, there's a lot of synergies with their current operations, and really it's an extension of one of their current operations, and they're working on the financing for it. So, I mean, that project I definitely see happening in 2023. In Reposición Antamina, Antamina has its plans. It's following its expansion plans. Antamina has all the money in the world. It's got strong shareholders, among them Glencore and Teck. So, I mean, I see that one happening, and that's got a combination of copper, obviously, that's of big importance, and also zinc and lead. So, you know, in 2023, 2 out of the 4 projects I see advancing. 2 out of the 4 projects are copper, right? I mean, Antamina and Magistral. Antamina I see advancing, Magistral I don't. The other 2 are zinc lead, which are Romina from Volcan and Corani from Bear Creek. You know, again, you know, I don't see Corani advancing this year, hopefully next year. But the fundamental problems around Corani, I mean, are not going to disappear easily. I mean, something needs to happen, right? And on the financing side, or on the corporate strategy side, or, you know, corporate side, if you will. So there you go. I mean, when we go into 2024, you've got 2 projects, as I mentioned, Zafranal and Yanacocha Sulfuros. Zafranal is Teck. Okay, it's about a between 1.5 and 1.8 billion dollars, depending on who you ask lately. You know, it for a long time, Teck was looking to sell it or joint venture it. And that didn't happen. Of late, I've heard that it's back on their project list and development project list. And in fact, just a couple of days ago, I heard that they've hired a project manager. Okay, and I know they've, you know, like an executive as a project manager. I know that they've been bidding out the EPC, EPCM contracts and stuff like that. So clearly on the pipeline. You know, a big project, an interesting project. I mean, the capex is not scary. You know, at 1.5, 1.7, 1.8 billion dollars is not that scary. That's going to make people, you know, have that much of a concern.
And 2 billion is not what it was. Like a decade ago.
Back in the day, $2 billion was like, oh my God. And now it's not so much, particularly when we talk about copper, right? So I mean, that project I see advancing. Now, obviously, you know, the future of Zafranal is very much tied up with the, you know, whatever happens between the Teck and
transaction,
transaction, right? So a bit up in the air, but you know, 2024 I think is reasonable. The Yanacocha sulfurs, I mean, you know, that's the project that is owned by Newmont. It's under the current Yanacocha gold pit, and it's a project that's, you know, a lot of money has been spent. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent already on Yanacocha sulfurs, and a lot of questions. Newmont actually put the project on hold, if you will. I mean, still spending money on it, but on hold in terms of the development because of, you know, the world situation. I think that was in the 3rd or 4th quarter of last year. I've also heard that the capex, which I think was around 2.5, has ballooned significantly. Okay, I'm not even going to say what numbers that you have been thrown out there, but I mean, you are talking about a significant increase in capex. You know, if you talk about a project that on paper is $2.5 billion, and that goes up to, I don't know, call it $3.5 billion. You know, $3.5 billion is still a lot of money. Okay. You know, Yanacocha is in an area that has historically had a lot of problems on the social side, right? Minas Conga is right next door, and Conga is a project that, you know, I don't think will ever see the light of day. Yet it's still in the pipeline of projects of the Peruvian government, right? But I don't think it'll ever see the light of day. So,
I think it just a comment is, I think it's interesting going back to what we were saying in the beginning and tying it to the JP Morgan note. We're seeing these companies try to go into more generally into more like deeper, you know, the parts of the ore body, because, you know, if you know, your oxides are going to be, you know, near the surface, are cheaper to extract and get into a product, but the sulfurs are, you know, much deeper. So you know that this Yanacocha has been operating for how long? Like, I don't know, a couple of decades? I don't know, long time.
Yeah.
So you're seeing that they're having to go deeper, and that's expensive. And you were talking about, like, it's gonna cost.
Yeah, but I mean, it's I see the Yanacocha sulfurs as a completely different project than the Yanacocha oxides. I mean,
Okay.
it's by no means a brownfield because of the type of deposit, the size of the deposit, the capex of the deposit. It's a completely different project, right? I mean, there are other projects here that yes, you would argue, is a bit of a brownfield, right? But this is very different in my view, and I find difficult to believe that Yanacocha sulfurs is going to be advancing as early as 2024 in terms of starting construction, because these 6 projects are all set to be starting construction either 2023 or 2024. I cannot see, Yanacocha sulfurs starting construction in 2024. So, there for 2024, you've got, 2 projects, both copper, one with, I think, a fair chance of advancing, which is Zafranal, and the other one, Yanacocha, which in my opinion, probably a lot more difficult. So
yeah, so I think it's a good sort of example of what we were mentioning in terms of, the pipeline may have a lot of names in some places, may have more names that the reality is going to actually bring. And I think one point that I forgot to mention was that we sort of mentioned it, like it's implied, but just to say it out loud, the risk that all of these names, even those in the pipeline, the risk that those projects don't come as fast as people are expecting, and this is exactly what you're saying, is very high because of all these different, potential problems that we've talked about. So you have companies or even governments having, these are the lists, and we can name 10, 20 different assets, and the reality is a small portion of those are going to actually get to construction decision even, and let alone get started constructing. And then you have the process of construction, which is another. So that risk is going to continue to rise in what we're talking about.
And obviously, I mean, that affects obviously the price scenario, that affects market sentiment. I mean, it's very dynamic and it's going to keep on moving, right? And you'd have to take a look. I mean, at any given time, I mean, all the banks, the larger banks like the JP Morgans, the Goldman Sachs, they have their list of projects and stuff like that. And you have to go through that list and see what their expected startup date is, for the projects, and really take a view of which ones you take a look at, right? I mean, I'm not going to have any opinion on, the list of projects in Africa, but I'll obviously have an opinion, right or wrong, it's an opinion. Of
course.
For, in projects in Peru, particularly, that we know well, but also, Ecuador, because we're involved in things in Ecuador and we know what the climate is and stuff like that. Same thing as Chile, Argentina, right? I mean, this is our region of expertise, so we'll have an opinion on that goes way beyond, what analysts and banks could be saying, right? And I don't know. I mean, really for me, the majors are the ones that have the biggest challenge, particularly because of the large scale projects that you need to bring into production, and they're the ones that make the trade-off decision of whether they build or buy, right? The mid tiers. Mid tiers today are very different from mid tiers 10 years ago, right? I mean, mid tiers today are multi-billion dollar companies already, right? I mean, they're not tens of billions, but they're more than $1 billion. And you see that, right? Whereas, 10 years ago, a mid-tier had a market cap of $100 to $300 million, right? And that was that was mid-tier.
Inflation for you.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, but I think, it even becomes tough for the mid-tiers, and you're seeing that with First Quantum, for example, which I still consider a mid-tier, moving into La Granja, Rio Tinto La Granja here in Peru that we discussed last time. But for the smaller companies, I mean, there's still a lot of opportunities. I mean, if Magistral is an example, I mean, and that's one of the projects we were just talking. I mean, I think that project's been around for a while, and I've heard a lot of different opinions about the re-engineering of that project, making it smaller, making it bigger, blah blah blah. But that's potentially an opportunity of a smaller project, of which there are still a number of, and don't have the same, financing challenges, social challenges, and stuff like that. You have to see on a case-by-case scenario. But I think the opportunity for the lower tier, if you will, copper producers or copper developers, of which there are not many, is still there to really, find a good project, take it forward, take advantage of these market sentiment on copper, and hopefully take advantage of the copper market and their expertise into developing mines and stuff like that. So we've seen a few examples of that.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be an interesting decade, really, because there's so much that needs to change. The copper market is already a big market, and to make it go to where it needs to go, we're gonna need a lot of projects, a lot of things coming online. I wish my dad was alive; he could help. I think we need some inspiration. That
we always need geologists. That's a beautiful thing. They're like lawyers.
Yeah, exactly. We need them and we love them. All right, I think
I'll go ahead with that comment because it's about your dad, but otherwise, the lawyers I'm not really sure about. But anyway,
no, we do. So I mean, I've had good luck with lawyers. I always find the good ones. I don't know, for some reason.
I can't complain. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. All right. I think we because we like talking so much, we went way overboard, but it's been a really nice one. I think it's been super interesting. Hopefully people are going to agree.
Yeah. Hopefully people will stay on long enough to hear the my view on lawyers. So well, we'll soon know.
We'll make sure to put a comment. All right. Well, yeah, it's super interesting, and this space is gonna get more competitive, and it's all in good fun. So all right, so that's it from us. You'll find all the links, then all the news reports and everything that we mentioned in the description, and we'll pop some charts and related images in the video as well. If you found this useful, funny, or ridiculous, why not? You can do that too. Please share it with your peers, and we'll be back. Not in 2 weeks. We'll be back next week because we're gonna be talking about the whole. We're gonna talk about what happened in Chile, whether that's a nationalization or something else. And so make sure you come back next week for that. All right.
Good talking to you.
Bye, Lucho.